next phase of, I guess, what we learnt and the mistakes we made, which links to this little thing here, which is what we're here to launch today. And so you've all got a copy of this. Again, we'll cover it as we go, but just so you can reference what we're working through. Look, one of the things that's been happening, and I'm privileged, I've worked with some of you in your schools in the room, but one of the things that's been happening is we've been doing these 12-month programs, these high-performance schools programs, and they run over a year or so. And in that time, of course, leadership teams set up some strategies, some things they want to do, just like we've covered. And then they put an action plan together and they get on the journey of doing it. And along the way, as we said, we have pulse data, we monitor staff wellbeing, and we have student data, we monitor student achievement. And we see whether this stuff helps or not. When we do those programs, they run in what we call clusters, which you're experts at, groups of schools together. And those leadership teams all get together and meet in these quarterly forums. In those forums, we have this conversation called hot issues. And I'm not sure, it could be the same as your hot topics. But it's a reactive time where people can actually nominate things on the spot that might be impacting upon their high-performance schools journey. When we do that, of course, we end up with these big, messy whiteboards full of issues. And out of all of that, as our groups, we decide which ones of those we're going to prioritise and spend a fixed amount of time chatting about. Yeah, these things are really helpful for us to get a feel about what really goes on in a school. What is a school leadership team really distressed about on the change journey? This is pretty messy, so what I thought I'd do is just unpack it in this way, make it a bit clearer. I want you to just have a quick look at it. Can you relate to any of these items? No, of course not. White anting, does anyone know what that means? Yeah, we don't need to unpack that. What about lack of buy-in? Yeah, people can kind of nod their heads and go, I think I know where they're going. Problems with commitment. What about factions? Oh, yeah. Okay. Getting staff to move beyond compliance, does that make any sense to you? Yeah, a lot of I've heard this one over and over again. And inflexible practices and putting out bushfires. Do you have a water hose thing and part of your job each day is to move about the school and hose people down? Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, well, bucket of water for you, sir. Bucket of water for you. Why on earth, remember, this is happening in the context of a group of disciplined leaders, a leadership team, organised, calm, effective, working on some very specific strategies with a school. It's not a reactive thing. This is happening inside a very structured and supportive program. These issues keep coming up over and over again. So that makes our antenna up even more in our high-performance schools environment. Why? What's with the repetition of these events, given these leaders' skills, given their training, given how they run things? And we're drawn back to this chart again and the undeniable reality of work routines and how important they are, and whether or not we realise that if we're addicted to anything, if you thought phones were bad, try work. And you know why it's so bad? It's because even when I say that, people might be laughing on the inside going, yeah, right, I'm addicted to my work. I hate my work. I'm not addicted to my work. But we know we are when we fiddle with your work because we see how upset you get, right? Yeah. What if we went out for a break, when we came back, we'd moved all your phones around, changed all the SIM cards so you could all still dial, but the rest of it was random, right? You'd be pretty unhappy. Because the only attachment of routine you have stronger than work is now your phone. But none of us see it this way. None of us see it this way. The daily grind, we either love or hate, as we say in the book. It's absolutely a place of predictability. It's the most predictable thing that happens in most of our lives. Our personal lives have all sorts of ups and downs. Our work in our own eyes is a place of constancy. But we don't see it that way. We just enter the lotto and can't wait to tell our boss to stick it and get on the helicopter and go to the island. But that's not what governs our behaviour. We have to look a bit deeper to understand what governs our behaviour. We need to change. We all know that, don't we? Particularly in schools. It's a must. It's a must now more than ever. Why now more than ever? Because of this. There's never been a time in history where this has happened before. There's been plenty of times in history technological advances have made a whole way of working redundant, but you know what? They made a whole new way of working possible. We're sitting in an environment now where 40% of all jobs will be gone in the next 10 years in Australia, not globally, in Australia. And we're almost certain, with artificial intelligence and technology and automation, we're almost certain that there will only be 10 or 20% of new jobs created. There's a net deficit coming. It's not the end of Cobb and Co. coaches and horses and Henry Ford and Model T and eventually it all settles down and everyone's working again. This is different. This is different. And who's in charge of whether or not our society is going to survive and thrive? You are. You're training the students. The students are the ones who will grow up and then be forced into the grappling with this incredible situation. You are the lead indicators for this. So we have to change and we have to get our staff into a position where they experience that moral imperative of change, where they have a different way of looking at things. But the question for us and the question that begs, creating a book of all things is this: how do we as school leaders manage these two forces of accelerating change and people's need for predictability and stability? That's what faces us. How do we deal with those two things in a way where we still achieve on our annual improvement plan, in a way where we still create high performance culture? Those two things are very, very powerful. Accelerating change and increasing need for routine and predictability at the same time. That's your job to manage that. That's a tough job. And I have great empathy and respect for you in signing up to manage that job. And you're signing up in managing that job in a workforce that's predominantly employees, right? There's not many contractors, and they're predominantly stable, i.e. they can stay in a continuous environment for long periods of time. So you've got some interesting challenges when we think about the kids and the jobs of the future, and we try to engage our teaching staff in what that's like. 70% of all change management fails, and I've looked at the meta-analyses around this stuff. All the scientists like to kick it when you make a grand statement like that. The most conservative estimate of failure is 58%. So no matter which way you cut this, most change initiatives will fail. That's not 70% of poorly planned initiatives, that's 70% of all initiatives. And we liken it to an iceberg. We need to dig underneath. We need to get beneath the surface if we're going to try and understand this. And that's what we did with all these school leaders over this 12 months. We kept listening and asking more. And we discovered that there were these significant problems in this area of personal impact and leadership mistakes. In the area of personal impact, you've got 3 devilish things going on inside a person during change. You've got letting go of old routines. Has anyone ever heard the saying, better the devil you know than the devil you don't? Yeah. And so people have got this stuff going on in them. And grief and loss, it sounds extreme, but it's not. Grief and loss is what happens in grief and loss? Does everyone remember the stages of it? You get denial and shock, and then up the other end you've got acceptance. What do you get in the middle? Anger. And what happens when you introduce change in school? Hey, I've got this great new idea. Do people get angry? But they can't be angry about your idea yet because it hasn't even happened. It's called displacement in psychoanalysis. It's called displacement. Their anger is displaced. They're upset about the possible loss of something they already know how to do. Even if they hate it, they know it. And so as leaders, we need to come to grips with that stuff. Just some basic information about displacement and work out how to spot it so we don't take it personally. The next one there is performance anxiety. And andragogy, of course, is adult learning. Pedagogy is children's learning. And we know that adults face a tough time learning and need slightly different conditions to learn than children. But the best way for an adult to learn is by doing, of course, and practice and making mistakes. But practicing and making mistakes, like me messing up here, doesn't work very well. We actually have to practice in private. And we have very little time as busy adults with families and our work to get the necessary practice of skills. So instead we cram and go to lectures late at night and read things, which are the poorest forms of adult learning. No wonder there's this cycle of anxiety, of performance anxiety. And the last one, of course, here is that emotional dissonance rearing itself up again. And we're not talking about emotional dissonance related to being stuck in the classroom for too long while I'm getting tired. We're talking about emotional dissonance when you're in the blender of not sure why, but feeling really angry because the past is going by and you can't keep it even though you didn't like it. And then struggling with all this anxiety about trying to wrap your head around new things. And then people ask you how you're going. And what do you tell them? I'm fine. That's burning you out. So our school leaders, we started to appreciate just how complicated this was. We also started to appreciate when we listened and listened and listened some common leadership mistakes that schools were making. Around the first thing was smoke and mirrors. Sometimes leaders, when introducing change, they like to explain to everybody about how great it's going to be. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be amazing. It's a chance for us all to do something different. But remember, if we like the familiar routine, the more we make it new and exciting, the more what? Distressed. Yeah, the resistance is because we're distressed. That we cranked that up accidentally. We didn't even know we were doing it. We're just trying to be positive. The other thing we do sometimes is we say, well, let's just try it out. Let's do a pilot. And then everyone thinks they'll be able to say no later. And then they find out we were lying. It's not good. The next one's positional power. Look, that's really obvious for us as leaders. Frameworks are there, organisational charts are there for a reason. But sometimes we over-rely on our positional power. Do you know what I mean? Has anyone done that as a parent? Because I'm your dad and I said so? And again, none of us do this as leaders under normal circumstances. But when we're under the pump, when we're having a bad time, we can sometimes inadvertently fall into that trap. And of course, in our culture, once you do that, the passive-aggressive white-anting we talked about earlier, that's going to eat you alive. Close communication bias. Do people know what this is about? This is really important. The longer you know somebody, the less you know them. The longer you know someone, the less you know them. So what we do in marriage therapy is we get a piece of paper with a big complicated diagram, maybe a circle, a square and all of this, and one partner holds it. And then on the other part of the room there's a blank piece of paper with the other partner and they've got a pen. And the task is simple. One partner describes what's on that piece of paper and the other partner draws it. Does that make sense? It's simple, right? What we know, because we've decided to do that in organisations for the last 10 years, we know, of course, that when two people know each other really well, when they reveal the drawing later and match it up to the original, is it the similar or different? It's radically different the closer people know each other. When we pull two random people off the street and do the same experiment, they almost match. That should worry you. Because a lot of you know each other well in your leadership teams and you're comfortable with each other. That explains the amount you could drive a truck through your strategy when you're talking with each other. Just that experiment alone. Look, I'll just finish off a couple more things. The unreasonableness of time. That's the last one in terms of understanding risk. And I just want to draw something very quickly here. Thank you for your patience. The other thing leaders don't understand sometimes is this phenomena. Again, can everyone see what I'm trying to draw here? Jagged line, point, and another one. What we know in change, of course, is that you have this situation where leaders hear people whinging and complaining about what's not working, and they go into this distress or worry cycle. They try to work out what's the right thing to do, and they go through all of this thinking, and they eventually come to a decision, and they introduce a point of change. Making sense? And then they go, oh, good, finally, we're moving forward now. They'll all those staff, they'll stop whinging, we've got it sorted. But that doesn't happen. The staff over here might be grumbling, but they're actually happy in their unhappiness. And then they get hit with the point of change, and they're, what? Just because I said I wanted you to change it doesn't mean I wanted you to change it. Just because I said it was hopeless didn't mean I want it fixed. And then what happens? We turn up and the leaders are calmer, but they're getting increasingly upset about being vilified. We say, the staff say, oh, they're secretive, those leaders, they don't tell us anything. And the leaders are like, I work with morons. And of course, they're both wrong. What they didn't understand is this. This is just called the change adjustment diagram, the change adjustment cycle. And this comes from marital therapy. This is called a divorce. Partner 1, oh, I don't think it's working. Partner 2, oh, everyone's like this. Separation, divorce. Partner 1, oh, that was such the right thing to do now. It's going to be okay. Partner 2, what the? Does that make sense? You can follow that in your personal lives. Why can't we import that as leaders into our professional lives? If we understood that, that would radically change how upset we got when other people were reacting badly around us. We wouldn't personalise stuff like we sometimes do as leaders. So that's what happened in this community of practice, this environment where we work this through. So what do we do about this? Just looking for my pointer. What do we do about this? Guys, I've only got a couple of minutes and then I definitely need to go. So I'm going to move quickly here just so we can close this off. What do we do about it? Just because we understand now that everybody's upset on the inside but they're not sharing it, and that we understand we get tongue-tied and despite being well-intentioned leaders, there's a minefield of trips and traps. What do we do about it? And I think what we do about it is we just get back to the basics. We have a look at a couple of simple strategies that are going to create some success, that are going to work no matter what. And we stick to our knitting, keep it simple. And so there are 4 things we cover in the book about this. Reducing pain and increasing pleasure. Structures that enable new behaviour, trying before you're buying, and of course having realistic time frames. Just quickly show you those. When we think about reducing pain and increasing pleasure, the easiest way to get people to do the right thing, as the quote says, and that's why they put the sign up before you get the speeding ticket. So you can drive along, speed camera ahead, pleasure or pain? I think I'll slow down, I'll go pleasure. It's really simple phenomena, but a lot of us don't design workplace change that way. We don't first ask that. And let's be honest, most workplace change is painful at the get-go. If we're lucky, the benefits flow through quickly, but the upfront adjustment isn't pleasure. What are we talking about when we talk about structured change in behaviour? When there's a hole in the footpath, there's a hole in the footpath, what does the council do? They put a fence up around it, yeah? Well, that's a structure, right? That changes behaviour. But what about if the council instead had an emotionally intelligent guru life coach that ran around going, hey, you're walking up towards the hole, you look pretty intelligent, but can I just encourage you to just go around the hole? And they just ran around and told everybody, they coached. They coached for change. Do you reckon anyone would walk in the hole? Yeah. Of course they would. So, you're better as a leader to have a structural initiative if possible, and then use your coaching as the finishing touches of a beautiful process, then rely on that alone, because it won't get the job done. Someone will always walk in the hole. Try before you buy. Most people buy their phone or their car because they think it's really good, because they think it works for them, because they think it makes their lives easier. Most people don't impulsively buy it because it's on special at the service station for $10. Particularly phones. Can you relate to that? And so anything you use a lot of, remember, or just like your work routine, you're going to protect. And to actually engage in some new behaviour, you're going to need to be able to try before you buy. Look at a car commercial. They will say the word of the brand of the car 20 times. You will see someone driving it, like an in vivo experience of it, 3 times. There are simple rules. If we follow them with workplace change, it always works. The reality is we don't always follow them. And then finally this. Has anyone ever tried to get fit or lose weight? You don't have to put your hand up, but I will, because it's true of me. You can put your hand up for this question though. Has anyone ever renovated their house or built a house? Did it take twice as long as you predicted? And when it comes to fitness and weight, are you like me? Did you never get there? So we know that any change, be it building a multi-billion-dollar hospital facility or trying to get fit, will take twice as long as planned. And that's why you have early completion bonuses in contract management. Because early completion, they know is theoretically possible. Why? Because they planned all that out, then they doubled it and put the tender in. Why can't we run our school change like that? Why can't we run our school change like that? On page 69, we have laid out the timing of any change you will make in a school, and based on dealing with human beings, how long it's going to take. How long it's going to take. Look, let's bring this home. What we found with our high-performance schools, when our school leaders get these 4 things right, okay, when they get all 4 of these things right, they massively speed up the time it takes to get something changed and increase the sustainability of the change. You know, it's durable. It's not up to them the whole time. It's not exhaustive. So what we've been doing is simply getting leaders to play with this toolkit. Okay, again, it's all in your book. And you can see how the examples of school leaders using this to plan how to deal with that white anting, how to increase collegiality, It's a simple process and it actually works. They suddenly realise, hang on, if I do this or that, that's going to knock on this way. I better risk manage that by doing this. Things we wouldn't normally think of in the busyness of our lives running a school. Consistent staff approaches to student behaviour. Again, simple tool, takes a couple of minutes, but it can reveal the weaknesses in how we're thinking about change, and as leaders, save us a lot of heartache by making sure we first check this out. Let's bring it together. We need to change. We need to change more than ever as school leaders because of the staff wellbeing imperative. And, even more importantly, staff performance. Remember that 40% of all jobs go in the next 10 years. Those staff, they've got to be at their best, and they've got to be at their best with. There's a lot more change yet to come for them. You know, we still don't know what we don't know. We need to have that change-ready workforce. There must be high levels of well-being. And of course, we all want to retire well. We want the children of today to become the leaders of tomorrow who will solve the big problems we face. So look, as we wrap up, I really like this one. Andy Warhol. You know, some staff, some leaders say, if I wait long enough, it'll sort itself out. Has anyone ever seen that? I'll just bide my time and a new leader will come in, or yeah, they say this, but I'll just wait it out. It's not going to happen, is it? We absolutely need to take the initiative ourselves. And so change, of course, begins with us. So thank you so much for letting me share this time with you. Thank you for letting me share those two important messages about the High Performance Teams project and a bunch of really simple strategies that anyone can use. Take the next step with your indicators where you said we're good at this, but we could work on that. Unpack that, do a bit of homework, photocopy it, share with your staff, get moving there. And we change, play around with those change plans and see what other schools are doing. Again, I can't thank you enough for letting me have this time with you. And on that note, I'll close. Thank you.
That would be in my context, very, very low socio-economics, XCF, so it would be with partnership with my community. For example, my kids don't have laptops at home, my kids don't have internet at home. We're lucky to get the mom on the telephone. So it's a massive issue for us because our kids come in with not even have gone to kindy. So how do we move them technology-wise? Number one, with the budget's resource limitation that I have on my site, and then with the community's limitation due to resourcing because I can't afford it. So very difficult, horrible thought because these kids need the access to go to high school. They need it now already. And I feel that at this point in time I can't provide what they really need due to resourcing, a lack within the home and within school.
When it comes to technology, reliable technology, okay, and everyone struggles with that. So it's not good enough to have the best lesson in the world and then get into a classroom, for example, and then the lesson fails because the technology fails. And teachers are wonderful at being adaptable. I've always said that when you become a teacher, flexible needs to become your middle name. So you need to be able to be adaptable. But the thing is, if we are expected to lead kids in a future that's so strongly or heavily rated with technology, we have to have reliable ways of educating them for that change in technology. And if it's not being catered for because the bandwidth in the schools or the reliability of the technology is not there, we're stuffed. Now, we've got problems. And so we need, the big rock is being able to, it's one thing being able to teach it from a point of view of the capacity of the person out front, but if they don't have the support with the technology, we're lost.
Many of our teachers come from fairly middle class backgrounds themselves. That's always a challenge in schools because people view things through their own lens. To help people safely step outside that and not lose those values that are important to them, but to use them to help children is a really important part of what we do. We work every day with children who don't have money, who haven't had breakfast, who have moved homes and don't know anything about it, who aren't living with their families, who've got many relatives in jail, who have a lot of violence and drugs and alcohol that they know about, things that many of our teachers have never experienced in their lives. That's challenging in a classroom for a teacher. one of our big things is to help people feel comfortable and safe, both as children and as staff members, to talk about those things safely and to move beyond that, to get results and get into a positive headspace about it. That can be really challenging when it's out of your experience. Because just as our teachers haven't experienced those things themselves, our children haven't experienced the success that many of our teachers have felt. So to get closer together with those two things is really a key part of what we do every day.
I think in the innovation space, one of the things that education professionals need to be careful of is that we don't get blindsided by the change that's going on in the world. Our worlds in schools can be fairly stable and fairly routine, and I think we run the risk that we're not really aware of what's going on in the broader context. So one of the big rocks is making sure when we're talking about coding in schools or in high school in robotics, artificial intelligence, that we really have those in the first, in the front of our minds, because to not think we need to respond to how the world's changing, we could well be blindsided. Another big one for me in my role as Director of Professional Learning is really getting the high quality professional learning opportunities out to our members. So we've got 1,200 members right across Queensland. Easy for me to put on some workshops in Brisbane or on the Gold Coast. A little bit more complex to get them to Longreach or the Tablelands or the Torres Strait. So that's one of the challenges, and hopefully I'll work with our branches to make that happen this year.
In relation to innovation and change, I think change is an ongoing challenge for a lot of people. It's something that we really need to recognise, make it very clear that it's there, but also to try to identify ways that we can move forward and embrace it rather than fight against it, because change is a reality, particularly in this digital disruption age, and we have to be ready to think about what's next and to think about whether we're doing things the best way possible as we work at the moment, and if not, why not?